I'm super honored to be with you right after your lunch during the nap time. I'm going to try to give you a lot of energy so that you don't fall asleep. Please, if you start to falling asleep, raise your hands. I'm coming next to you to shake you up. So anyway, yeah, I'm Mehdi. So you have the slides. I think that's the most important QR code to take because all the links then are from there. Also, if you are following us remotely, just grab the slides because the codes, links, and so on are also there. And on each slide, you have on the left corner the question, the Slido, and on the right, the slides QR code. So yeah, quickly about me. I'm Belgian. I've been living in Berlin for the past 6 years, but I actually just moved back to Belgium. It's funny because I think I've applied multiple times to different PyData, and I've been talking to other PyData, but never in Berlin, and they picked me up the year I decided to leave Berlin. So that's funny. I've been working for the past 10 years as a data engineer in different scale-up and tech startup, husband and father, and I've been doing also a lot of content online. So you have on the left my personal YouTube channel, which is also still active, data AI stuff, and also software engineer in general. And the MotherDuck YouTube channel that I'm working on for MotherDuck. We'll come back to that. What is this? And all my work are on medio.com if you want to follow up later. Usually I ask everybody to subscribe before they leave the room, because when you do that online through a YouTube video, they can just skip it. Please don't skip it if you're watching this from remote. But anyway, we'll see depending on the quality of the workshop. So rules of these workshops, no stupid question. You can interrupt me whenever you want. Just raise your hand. You have the Slido if you're too shy, or you just quack. That also works for me. If you're ahead of an exercise, help the person next to you. Teaching is learning. That's why I'm doing developer advocacy, is because the best way to actually learn something is to teach others. So look ahead and just help each other. The requirement is just a laptop. A Duck is optional but useful. An internet connection, a browser, a terminal. We'll do a bit of DuckDB CLI, even if the focus today is, where are we? At PyData. So it is Python. Thank you. You still are starting to go on a nap. So the focus will be mostly the Python library from DuckDB, but you can use any client and use your favorite IDE if you want to run things locally. For you, I prepare a repository with some Google collabs. So you just click and everything is ready and you have the slides. Any questions so far? No? All right. So the workshop goal is to learn one way to use DuckDB in your Python project. So I always say that the blessing and the curse of DuckDB is you're going to see, because it's a different kind of database, you can do a lot much more things than the standard database. And that's confused people. So you can use in web development, you can use also in data for data pipeline. So just learn one thing to do it. We'll be answering a lot of couple questions among our learning, because I think it's important to have clear business code that adds value. So for example, what were the people in the US binge watching during the COVID? What is the ratio of programming language in DuckDB or any GitHub repository? What is the most upvoted Hacker News story each year? So yeah, the small exercise we go through to understand how DuckDB works. We'll always try to answer an interesting questions that at least you get out of knowledge if you don't like DuckDB. And if you don't like DuckDB, please talk it to your enemies. At least it's worth the time. So that's the agenda for today. So workshop intro done. And we're going to talk about the evolution of data analysis. I'm going to make a lot of analogy for DataFrames. Who has been working with any library of DataFrames, Polars, or Pandas? Raise your hands. Okay, almost the whole thing, the whole room. So that's why basically I do kind of this approach. So it's not because to basically say one is better than the other. I still use both, but so that you can understand from where you are coming to where you're going with DuckDB. And then we're going to have the first part, the DuckDB ecosystem, to understand. So a lot of mini exercise, and then one longer exercise, building an end-to-end pipeline with DuckDB. Everything is in the notebook. You shouldn't use notebook to run in production. I don't want to start another debate here and a war. But this is good for learning, right? So that's being said. And in bonus, we have WASM, which is WebAssembly, MCP for the AI vibe, Duck Lake, whatever left minute we have. It could be a raise hand depending on the topic you want. On each slide, whenever you see that duck, what is that duck doing? Exercising. Yeah, that's obvious. It's written. Oof. Not yet napping. So whenever you see that, that means there is a code block to run. So usually just go there, run the code block, but don't run it blindly. Yes, there is the notebook, and you just can run blindly with closing your eyes. Tweak a bit of a command. Just try to understand what is happening. Break things. It's important. It's when you break things that you learn how it works. I always say you're not a data engineer until you break production on a Friday. So whenever you see that duck, there is an exercise left, and usually I give you a couple of minutes to do it, ask questions, then I'll follow along, and we move next. Clear for everybody? All right, let's go. So a bit of the timeline around DataFrame is that basically in the 70s, in 2000, it was really all about traditional database. So the big Oracle, MySQL, it was heavy because it was used for basically everything, not just for data analysts. And back in 2000, 2010s, DataFrame starts to arrive in R and Pandas. And actually, Pandas took a lot from the DataFrame library in R. So everybody is inspiring from each other. And people say, I can just install Python or R and, install a library, and then I can do, some analysis. Like that much easier than this dinosaur Oracle. And then basically we arrive in 2020s, and we have a lot of cloud analytical database that start to take over the world. And we're kind of coming back to database, or not. Maybe there is something in between. So that's why we're going to see for. And I feel like DataFrame today, we have stretched them beyond their design. So it's really great for quick analysis, experimentation, in-memory computation, one-hour answer. But it's not for data persistence, team collaboration, serving data, data governance. And so you might say, but Mehdi, you are comparing apple to orange. Yes, but that's literally what's happened in the industry, where people switch it like, oh yeah, I don't need that database. I can just install Python and a DataFrame library. Oh, but wait, now I need this, I need this, I need this, all right? And so yeah, the question is, whoops. With 3 lines of code, here is Polars, but it's the same story for Pandas. You get an answer in 3 lines. That's really perfect. And it works still great, and I still use it for a couple of use cases that it's shown on the left. And so DataFrame 1, basically, it's a recap I just said. You don't have to pay expensive license. You don't need a DBA expertise. You just do pip install. But yeah, can we have maybe something in between that gets the feature from everything, where it's easy to install as a pip install DuckDB? That's what we're going to see right now. So let's start to exercise from now. So DuckDB is an analytical in-process SQL database. It is born and mainly maintained in Amsterdam by DuckDB Labs. Hannes was there last year for a keynote here in Berlin, if you met him. And basically, MotherDuck is the SaaS company, and we have a new kind of business model with open source, which is not actually, as far as I know, another company, where DuckDB Labs basically have equity in MotherDuck. And DuckDB Labs focus basically on making the product, the DuckDB open source, as great as possible. And we have a collaboration with them, and we basically ship it to the cloud to ease scaling and production use case. So that's the whole story about, so that you understand. DuckDB Labs, Amsterdam, and MotherDuck is US VC-backed company. So this is the first snippet. So if you open the Google Colab, and you start, basically I'm gonna zoom in a bit. All right. So first time, just start the compute. And you're gonna see something fun when I'm gonna install DuckDB, which is the Python library, is that requirement already satisfied. Why is that so? It's because DuckDB is pre-installed on all Google Colabs. So it's one of the chosen library by Google to be pre-installed up to the latest version, as you see, on Colab. That's amazing. There's even nothing to install there. So what do we do first? Here, basically, just start importing DuckDB, creating a connection, and just run our first inline SQL. And that's it. So I want you to go ahead and just experiment how easy it is. Just run the simple snippet. I'll give you just a couple of minutes to get your environment ready, opening the notebook. So as a reminder, you have the notebook link over there. So if you go here, you get the repository. So either you can clone and have it as a local Jupyter notebook for you, or you can use the Colab. If you click right there, you have the direct link. Anyone is completely lost and something is broken, don't be afraid. It's the best way to learn. If you have a question, raise your hands. If you successfully done the first part, yeah?
Can you show me the slider number again, because you're always going so fast?
Yeah, this one? Sure. Give you a couple of minutes. All right. I forget to mention, but also in the order of not you getting an app on the tutorial, I'm also going to bribe you. I have some stuff over here. I'm sorry for the remote, but you can also maybe win something at the end. And so whenever there's going to be some question, if you're the first one to get it, just raise your hands, and you might want some of the beautiful swags. I'm not showing everything. I do have some stickers because I know, like everybody at the conference there, stickers collector. So yeah. All right. So we've run our first query, and SQL really in 2025. Well, there is a Lindy, I think, saying that is applicable to programming language. It's a programming language is going to stick around as long as it's already there, right? And SQL has been there since 74. And what was on the music station in 74? Sorry? Yes, that's right. ABBA. Wow. ABBA won the Eurovision that year. Waterloo, I believe. So now whenever you're going to get at the music quiz, you're going to scream DuckDB. Been there, done that. Anyway, so SQL, not DuckDB, SQL was first released in 74, but it's still heavily used. And just to show you, this is, DuckDB supports the standard SQL, and there's a lot of transpiler if using, SQL on Databricks or whatsoever to easily convert. But what I want to show you is that there is couple of examples that we can use later, which is one it's custom function from DuckDB. The group by all is really interesting story because you see usually you need to specify on each column that you want to group. So here, city and street name, right? Or you can just mention group by all. And fun fact, it was first adopted by DuckDB like 4 years ago, then BigQuery adopted, then Snowflake adopted, then Databricks adopted. And then it get finally, you know, a couple of years later in the standards. But yeah, DuckDB, just to say that it's leading really the way on simplifying the SQL dialect with some useful function. I like the exclude. I use it a lot when you have like one column which is really large and you don't need to, but you want to select all the others. And here also when you need to find a specific column, so and they have multiple them like population something, then underscore, then you can just do, you know, pop and it will list all the column with the data that has the pattern match. So you have a lot of others that I invite you to check it out on DuckDB documentation. It's really fun. And is also the, you know, the most demanding skills in data today. So that's the common denominator between data scientists, data analysts, data engineer, and yeah, backend engineer, web developers. Like everybody can talk SQL. So it's really nice to have one single language, you know, across the company where everybody can contribute. And another fun fact is that, for example, Spark, which was, you know, initially heavily DataFrame library, they had the SQL interface much later. I know they shared on their summit that the most called API are through SQL. Okay, Polars is another example where they started as a library. They have really good syntax on the library style DataFrame. They also added SQL support. So DuckDB has been growing like crazy. As you can see, we have more than 4 million downloads, and that's the DuckDB, the Python client, okay? It's been growing really exponentially these past years. If you're asking, Mehdi, what is this huge drop a couple of weeks back? Well, this is someone that has opened multiple CI on Azure running DuckDB. So yeah, this is not unique user, it's downloads. I did a bit of research, and they finally, you know, shut down those CI running like madness. Probably got fired because of over budget cloud, who knows? Anyway, that's always a fun story. You can also go to the website, and there is a full project and other projects. If you go over here, with a couple of videos I've done and blog for an end-to-end project, which is much longer than what we're going to do today. But if you want, you know, to go to a next step with a production-ready project, this one is great. It's been running for more than a year now. So yeah. Next. So yeah, as I said, DuckDB can run anywhere. So you have all the different package you can use on Node.js, Python, R, Rust. You have also an UI and a CLI. I'm going to show you quickly the CLI. It runs on any platform, would it be Linux or Windows is your vibe still. Here on Mac OS, you can just do you know, brew install DuckDB. You have also one curl command on the website. If you go on duckdb.org, you have this website, which is basically just a one-line script. So I have already installed, and when you have installed, you can just launch the CLI like this. I play a lot with the CLI. So yeah, and then you can start to do any query. And so for example, if I take all our example today will be packaged, right, in a connection.sql, right? But you can, of course, just use the CLI directly, so that works fine. And you have also an UI, which is a SQL notebook. So you see it's launching just a SQL UI right there. And so that's run locally. And then if you click here, you sign up, you are on the cloud with MotherDuck ready to scale your compute. There is a fee here also, so don't be scared. Will not eat your credit card anyway. So yeah, that's for the interface. So I may jump back sometimes on the CLI because I really love it. If you're using also Notebook, there is specific integration on Notebook to just use SQL and don't have the com.sql every time, and you have nice syntax. But as I told you, you should not run notebooks in production. So I want you to get the best, practice from the start and have the painful this. Usually what people do is that they wrap this into, function for this, and then they call it to the Python program or pipelines. All right, new kind of database, but why, Mehdi? You've been talking about how DuckDB is amazing, everybody is downloading. Well, if you look at a traditional database, you have basically SQLite. Who has heard about SQLite? Raise your hands. Okay, so yeah, a good portion. So SQLite is also just a library. You just do a pip install SQLite. I think it's the most installed database in the world because it can run in process. You don't need it run within the Python process or any programming language. There is no specific server required where you install this. MySQL Postgres typically is a client server, right? So you're going to have a Postgres. If you run it locally, you're going to have an instance of Postgres in a Docker container, and then you have a client, a PSQL client that's going to send the queries over there or communicate with the server. And then you have OLAP database. So OLTP is for transaction database. So that's everything that powers classic web application, where basically it's a row-oriented storage. And so we're going to update, delete specific row, a user get connected, a user log out, a user did something. That's specifically at the row level, and the requirement in terms of latency, it's much lower. We're talking on the milliseconds there, even lower. And for OLAP database, that's really online analytical processing database, right? And so this is where you're going to start to doing analytics query like group by, aggregates, sum over a large table. And their storage is stored in column format, which is much more appropriate for those storage. Sometimes people ask me, but Mehdi, I'm doing my analytical queries in Postgres, it's just fine. Yes, and that's true. Like your operational, if you're using Postgres or MySQL for your operational database, that's where you start to do your first analytics. But the problem is that you're using the same compute than your production database, even if you have a replica, and those database hasn't been designed for those type of queries. So at some point, you're going to hit a bottleneck, right? But everybody, a lot of people are starting there, and then they offload to, an analytical database. So Snowflake, Google BigQuery, ClickHouse, all the others, they're, client-server approach. And then DuckDB is really one, unique of a kind, where it's an OLAP analytical database in process, okay? So we often refer it as the SQLite for analytics. So now you understand. All right, so that's the DuckDB ecosystem in a nutshell. Don't be scared, there is a lot. There is the cloud storage, it can talk to DataFrame engine. There is, DuckDB has its own file format also. It can communicate directly with database. It can read and write from many file formats. Who has heard of table format like Iceberg, Delta Lake? Raise your hands. Okay, who has been using it in production? Raise your hands. All right, just to get a glimpse. It's a really small number if you're watching remotely. Anyway, so for each box, we're going to do a mini exercise. So you're going to see those exercise deck for every time. So let's go ahead. So same first notebook, right? We're still in the first part. You can go and check to understand how the DuckDB file format works. And so for that, thank you. And so for that, what you're going to do is create a connection. But if you remember, on the first query we did, before just to do a hello world, we didn't specify, a file name there. Any idea why? Yeah? It's in memory. Everything is in memory. So, and here, basically, we are doing something with it, obviously. So when you're going to run this, I recommend you to look at the file explorer. So I'm not super here. All right. So what is going to happen? So I run this. There is no tables there. And now if I create a table. So now I have a table named ducks, right? I stored my Mandarin, which is average age of a Mandarin duck is 6 years old. Okay, so it's the duck that that look like Pokemon. Okay, I've seen them quite often in Berlin too. So anyway, you'll learn something at least if you don't remember anything from DuckDB. You can show off on some evening nerds. But you have to tell me like which occasion you have to mention the average age of a Mandarin duck. I don't know how to pull that off. Anyway, so everything is in memory. Now let's actually break things. Where do I restart? You see, I'm using often. Let's just reload. Oopsie. I'm just gonna reload. All right. So now it's connecting again, and if I do show table, I have no more my ducks there. I lost them. Because, as someone said, everything is happening in memory. All right? That's the default. I haven't specified anything here. So now, because we are in the section to understand the DuckDB file format, if I put this, and I run the same query again, badam. Do you see? So if you look at your file explorer on the left, whatever, if you're an IDE or whatsoever, you're going to see there is a DB file and there is a WAL file where there is the logs. And this one is going to disappear as soon as you close the session, and the data is going to be persisted on the DuckDB file. You can pick any format extension that you want. Typically, by standard, we use .db or .ddb or .duckdb, you know, for DuckDB file format. The .db is like a most common approach, I would say, in database in general. So yeah, what is important on this DuckDB file format? Well, as I said, by default, the DuckDB won't persist the data. The DuckDB database will create, if not exist, or attach. We're going to see the attach command, I believe, right after. So here we're opening a new connection to a database, but you can also use, most people use the attach command. We're going to see it once the process is already there. So you can start the DuckDB process without the, mentioning the file path and then attach a database file path. It's going to create it if there is no file at this path, or it's going to load the data if there is an existing database at this path. Okay, so everything is done for you. It's one file that contains data and metadata. It supports compression, supports updates. So Parquet is really, by design, really good format for analytics, right? And you have to count that 100 gigabytes of data of Parquet will give roughly 130 gigabyte of data in turn of DuckDB file format, because you have much more information around metadata. You can actually run those metadata functions, so I invite you to do this. We're going to run some of them. But so, for example, the DuckDB tables give us all the information about the tables, and also the SQL statement, which is really useful if you want to recreate a table with just that. So maybe let's do that. So if I do count.sql and I do from DuckDB tables, I'm just going to run that. And of course, it doesn't work because I have a typo. No one said something. You just let me like over there. It's really sad. I feel alone on this moment. Anyway, so you see that you have this. It's not, I think it's because I zoom in. Yeah, so that's a bit much better. And the table is pretty long. You can also do, for the, let's say, select SQL. and you get the create statement that we just used before. So that's metadata information. You have you can update the schema and so on. What happened there? I just did a from. What is it part from? I didn't do any select star. Yeah? Yeah, sure. Sorry. So I did a from, which is part of the friendly SQL dialect. So instead of always doing a select star, you just don't. Again, simple. Just do a from statement. I use it all the time. That's one of my previous feature, and I'm still waiting for BigQuery and Snowflake to adopt it, because whenever I go over there, I'm getting lost of doing a select star again. But you shouldn't do a select star in production again, huh? Just saying. So yeah, that's about the DuckDB file format. We understand that, so I already spoiled you actually with this question. I mean, the answer was really in the code, right? So too easy. You don't deserve anything for that yet. So let's go for the other file format, which is commonly used, which is CSV, Parquet, whatsoever. And here we're going to do a lot of things with one command. So I invite you to run this one, which should be next. And whenever you have an answer about this question, you just raise your hand. I don't think I've put the answer. Did I? Oh man, I did. I'm really babysitting you right now. But whenever you have the answer, raise your hands, scream, and tell me what was the favorite TV show and movie. I'll leave you a couple of minutes. So I put black magic, yeah? Yes, and yeah, good job. And what about the movies? Sorry? All right, I need to check that out myself. Okay. Sorry? Platform? You all have different movies. What's happening? No, you're just guessing. All right. Yeah. What is this? No. I haven't heard the right answer. Sorry. I'll try. Yes, so the data set is not super explicit. You haven't to understand a bit the data. But you know, that's the reality. I'm not going to explain you what is the column about. Like, you know, who is living in a world where they have column description and everything? All right. Still waiting for an answer. Huh? So meanwhile that you raise your hand whenever you do that, I'm going to explain a bit the black magic, what's happening. There is a lot to unpack here with just this first command. So in this first command, what we have is a from statement. So first, it's a specific DuckDB SQL friendly, which avoid me to do a select star. Second, I'm passing an S3 path. Did I install anything regarding AWS and S3? No, I haven't installed anything. Third, I'm reading a Parquet file. Did I specify that I need to read a Parquet file? No, nothing. What is happening? So there is three things happening. So the from statement is, transpile into standard SQL. There is the S3, which is loading a specific extension to read data over a blob storage, which is the HTTP-FS extension. So DuckDB has its own extension mechanism. So there is a series of core extension that DuckDB supports, like Parquet, HTTPFS, that's the one that's been loaded. Spatial is one heavily used in the geospatial community. DuckDB has a lot of success. Postgres has also an extension. And so all those extensions are built in C++, because DuckDB is built in C++. Most of them are built in C++, at least the core. You can write into other language, but as DuckDB is written in C++, that's where you're going to get the much more larger API and performance. And so how it's working is that behind the scene for you, it's loading those extensions. And everything is in one binary at the end. So DuckDB binary is really, really light because it's written in C++. And all those extensions are installed and load locally for you. Super light, no dependency, no Python dependency hell, okay? So they write the entire read CSV. They're really performant on that. They have also people that work at the University of CWI really to be able to read the most disgusting CSV, even if I hate working in CSV. So yeah, it's heavily invested into research because DuckDB is born in Amsterdam at the CWI. Who knows the CWI? All right, is it because you watched a Python documentary recently? Because the Python documentary was released a couple of days ago about the story of where Python was born. I really highly recommend. And they shoot a lot of shots of people at the CWI, so that's where Python was born, and this is also where DuckDB is born. So do you understand now, like, a bit why there is so much investment into core components in DuckDB? And so you have the core extension and you have the community extension. And so community extension is basically anyone can create an extension and then publish it to the extension store. Those, of course, is not going to be auto-loaded. But you see, for example, I'm collaborating with the maintainer of the one from BigQuery, where you can connect directly with BigQuery, just pure SQL. And you can start using DuckDB to crunch some data. So many community extensions over there, and then core extension maintained by DuckDB itself. So coming back to the notebook, anyone want to spoil the answer? What? Speak louder. Yes. All right. And there was also Cocomelon. What is Cocomelon? Who knows Cocomelon? Raise your hands. That's all the parents represent. So a fun fact, interesting to see what's happening, like just on the data, is that during COVID, a lot of kindergarten were closed and so on. I was in the same situation. My kid was much more younger, so not on the TV yet, but I understand, like, parents have to work from home and have to handle kids that cannot go to school. So that explained what's the most popular shows and movies on both are all, mostly everything is great, from kids. Also kids like to watch, the same movie and movie again. So that's also bumps up the statistic directly. Anyway, that's like for the data, but just to wrap up on the extension, we have we can read directly, actually, from there, right? And then what do we do here? We create a table which is going to be in the DuckDB file format, okay? Either in memory or through a file. Because as you can see here, I did an attach command. So just to go back, I did an attach command, which is basically the same than specifying in the connect. So here you can specify a path. You can also specify a path on S3 with a full DuckDB database. And then basically use Netflix, and because Netflix is not there, it's going to create it. So if I run it again, it's going to attach the database which is existing. And so here I create the table. And what I wanted to show, this is another metadata function. Let me go. What is happening? Let me just, probably deleted my cache. So if I do this with the CLI and then from DuckDB extension, which is another metadata table, this is the list of core extension. And you can see I have some that has installed and loaded. Those are installed into a dot folder in your home directory by default, so a .duckdb folder, and you can find all the extensions. And so you have the extension for Parquet and HTTPFS, which is install and loaded, and I haven't done anything. If you want to install and load an extension by yourself, you have to do install the name of the extension. So we'll do that for spatial, because some extensions are not auto-loaded. And then you have to load it, simply, okay? So install, basically download the binary on your home directory, and then after you load. So if you do one install, but typically if you're running it into a pipeline, everybody do install and load. But for common action, if you just need to read over S3 and so on, this is not needed. So yeah, that's about the extension. We've seen a quick data analysis example. What else did I wanted to say? Yeah, so you see those data sets, I mean, those data sets are really small, but yeah, it's always 0 seconds. I was a bit challenged to do something larger. I'll do a bit something larger after. The problem is that in conference, I don't want to rely on network data, but you can crunch, easily between 10 to 100 gigabytes of data within under a minute, in DuckDB. That's really impressive. If your data is stored locally, or if your data is stored on S3, it will pull it out locally, and then you're going to run it. Yes, question? Yes?
Is it DuckDB's own SQL, or is it based on like Postgres or something?
Yeah. Yes, so the question was, is the DuckDB SQL syntax its own or inspired, by previous database? Both. So they took a lot of inspiration from Postgres, but also, lead the way in innovation regarding, like, for example, the group by all that I mentioned. It was adopted after by other database, analytical database, but initially it's heavily inspired, by the Postgres syntax. Yeah, and it followed the standard SQL. So if you're not using super fancy features than DuckDB, you can. It also works. All right, just taking the time. Everybody has run this part. Again, it's really important that you go ahead, run these things and get a bit of exercise, break the things. I'm just going to look if there is any question. I see there is 3 questions. Sorry? Yeah.
Can I get it?
This one? Yeah. There is, do DuckDB queries do lazy evaluation? So not really, not when you do like that and you execute is directly. There is work to do over there to have the full lazy, I would say, evaluation. But it do persist on disk too when you hit, your memory limit. So the bottom line is, in general, if you do exploration, the data is so much compressed, around the DuckDB file format because the data is persisted there, and it handles quite beautifully when to, split out to disk when there is no more space in memory. That it works pretty well, but that's something also to work on. Can you explain what it means to connect DuckDB to BigQuery or another DuckDB? How is it still in memory? How can it fit to memory? So, for example, we're going to see it right after, actually, with Postgres. So I'm going to come back to that question. All right.
There's a third one.
Yeah.
Is there a way to have DuckDB as a kernel for Jupyter?
So you can use DuckDB within Jupyter. I'm not sure to understand the question. Or is there anyone that can maybe rephrase for dumbass like me? No? So maybe someone remote? OK. But DuckDB works in Jupyter Notebook, so I'm not sure to understand the question. It can run into any Python process. I think maybe the question is maybe a person is looking for a specific extension. You can have just to use the pure SQL within the notebook so that it's a bit more nice for the experience, if that's the question too. All right, I'm just looking at the time because we have a lot to cover. All right, another one. Let's go. Some contests. Takes 2 minutes and answer the question. Who did answer the first question? I heard about the... there you go. Price get bigger. So whenever you have your answer, just raise your hands, and then we unpack like what is happening again into this black magic. Yeah?
It seems that there's an API that
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Is it because we are all from the same network? That's possible? Okay. Price is for me then. Let's try. It works, but it's possible. It's possible from the network. Are you running from collab? From local? Okay, yeah. Here I'm running from server sides. So, okay, I give you the answer in front of you. C++. All right. So as I said, and I told you the answer before. I told you that DuckDB was written in C++. So what is happening behind the scene? So we are query directly an API. So if I go here, API rate limits, thank you. So that's the reason. So yeah, if you query probably locally, there is a bunch of people, and GitHub is like, what the hell is happening in Berlin? They all want to know, what's the programming language on DuckDB. But anyway, so this is an answer, a JSON answer from a public API from GitHub. And what is happening there is that we are doing a read JSON auto, right? So this is something I didn't unpack. Actually, I'm sorry. I went a bit too fast. But if you remember, we did a from, and I said we don't specify the Parquet. There is a Parquet extension loaded. And of course, there is a read Parquet function if you need specific parameters, like a raw group by, etc. For CSV, you have a read CSV auto, and you have also a read CSV where you can specify the columns and with data type, okay? So all those functions are available, and you can use it if you need extra parameters. But if you don't, you just skip the function, and DuckDB is going to recognize the file format. So here, for instance, we are specifying read JSON because, as you can see, there is not .json. It's an API, right? So I'm just telling DuckDB, hey, I don't know what's the file format in that path, right? What is it? So I'm just saying this is a JSON, so that's why I need to specify the read JSON auto, okay? So normally this is a key value result. So you have C++ as a key, as the programming language as a key on the JSON response, and the value, which is in terms of bytes, the quantity that contains that programming language. It's basically what you see here when you go on GitHub, right? In terms of real number. This is what we are computing right now. So we are calling an API. We are parsing a JSON file, And then we are doing an unpivot to transform those key value into a proper table that we order by language and the value, because it's a key value, so I transform into 2 columns, bytes, and that's it. So again, okay, 1 second. I'm sorry. 1 second for this, and we are parsing JSON API without installing any other dependency. I'm going to repeat it myself. I just install 1 single library, and I'm able to parse an API to JSON and return a table. If you can do it in less than 1 line of code, please tell me so, because I'm happy to know what kind of other black magic they are doing. Yeah, so this is really, really powerful and really simple to learn. All right. So we've done a couple of those right now. What about authentication, Mehdi? You haven't told us, like cloud storage. Yes, we've been querying public bucket, right? That most MotherDuck hosts for the Parquet file. But that's not the common, of everybody. Everybody should have private buckets, again, best practice production. And so to authenticate, basically, DuckDB has a secret manager. And typically, if you're using locally, you can just use the credential chain, which means, for example, if you are on the terminal and you do, your AWS SSO logging, for example, you're going to have your credential refresh into your .aws folder, right? And then basically on DuckDB, you do this, and DuckDB will be able to fetch your SSO credential. You can also work with static key, of course. That's typically the case if you have a CI that's running or whatsoever. And then you can also create other secrets for Azure and Google Cloud Storage too, and for Postgres, if you want to connect to a Postgres database. So I invite you to create a secret. There is Duck with the exercise. Go, go, go. And you're going to try to query this database. So I'll let you a bit of time. You have the slides to copy this or to go, I think it's in the notebook. And then you need to attach the database. So I'm just doing here a simple attach. I don't mention a path because I'm just saying it's a type Postgres. So DuckDB say, oh, yeah, that's the secret you created, which is type Postgres. So I'm going to connect to that DB. And then you're going to tell me when was the oldest Duck first observed, meaning first registered. Really important information too. So what do you think is happening when I'm doing an attach like this behind the scene? What is it loaded in DuckDB? Yeah?
The table schema from the Postgres database.
Before that, what is needed to talk to Postgres? I think I heard it. Yes, the extension. So the extension is loaded behind the scene. Again, so if you do it manually, you would do install Postgres, load Postgres. Okay? This is done manually because it's recognized it's a Postgres database. And coming back to the Slido question, so the Postgres database is extension is heavily used. It was called the Postgres scanner. And so DuckDB is going to do a query against Postgres and then load the data. And some of the data can be pushed down to Postgres. So they're going to be filter pushed down. So for example, if you do filtering against states, okay? and some not. So some will be, sometimes the data is going to go over the network and then, you know, put into the DuckDB memory and then compute it from there. So depending on knowing that, right, you have to be careful on how much data you're going to, you know, put over the wire, right? But this extension is really heavily used because what I told you at the beginning is that a lot of people start with, you know, Postgres running analytics directly on Postgres, right? And this is a really good way to do a good compromise. You install DuckDB and you read from Postgres, but you try to offload the compute from Postgres, right? And the installation is just a pip install. Usually, typically, also, I recommend you use a replica of Postgres, don't hit your production database directly. But we see often that. And it's also a great way to move data around. So people are using the Postgres scanner to move data to a DuckDB, you know, in memory or file format, process some data, and then write it to Parquet directly. Because we've seen so far only read CSV, read Parquet, and so on. But in one command, you can also export. Who knows in SQL what's the typical command to export something? If you're coming from Postgres, you should know. Yeah, the copy command. So you use just the copy command, the table, and you can do also a select query statement. We'll see that later. And you specify the file format. Will be CSV or Parquet. Any answer for that? Or are you still already napping? You don't have it? Yeah, good job. Yeah, so in the 70s, so it's pretty old, and it's just a data set. So basically, what you did, if you did the create statement, it's a public Postgres database hosted on Supabase, and there is a read-only user that I give you with a data set called ducks, and you can basically see yeah, the table from Postgres there. So let's go ahead. So I'm creating the secrets, and I haven't put the attach command. That's why you're lost? Because it's in the slide and not the notebook? Come on. Yeah, and on top of that, there is missing quote. Oh man, I give you a hard time. What is happening? Because I haven't put the right thing, so that's not going to work. You see, I'm actually going to all the barrier that you've been facing. I'm sorry, but this is the reality. No one is going to hold your hands, right? You know that better than I. All right, so that's the real secret, and now it should work. Yeah. So now I can do show tables. I probably need to use a use statement to select. When you do an attach command, is not selecting the current database. Okay. So I'm just using the use statement. That's a classic command in the database world. And then now I can do show tables, for example. And I'm going to see the Postgres table, which is ducks. So this one is hosted on Postgres, right? And so now if I do, for example, from ducks, then I have this data set, which is a bit weird. It's basically just a registry on when the first duck appeared in the word was registered. Yes, I know I have really weird data sets. And yeah, so a lot of them were, you see, actually in 70, 50, or 40 something. Yeah. All right, that's about it. So you see how easy it is. So to answer the question on Slido about what is happening in BigQuery, it's basically the same, right? But it's also depending on the extension, what's going to be pushed down to the compute of the remote database, right? And for example, I worked with the maintainer of BigQuery so that we make sure that most of the heavy lifting is done on the BigQuery, and there is little to data to get from over the wire, but you can also tune it with parameter depending on what you do. But for me, I was basically just computing some large data on BigQuery, pre-computing there, and doing the rest on DuckDB. All right, DuckDB and Polars, I'm just going to go quickly on that because we start to run out of time. It's moving fast, but you can also try that. I think it's in the notebook. It's just to show you that you can actually query directly a Polars or a Panda data frame using SQL and DuckDB directly. And how is this black magic working? Do you know which library is doing the bridge between DuckDB and Polars? Sorry? I think, yeah, Arrow, exactly. Arrow is the unsung hero of our time. It's used by many databases. It's many data frame. It's a representation of in-memory on how to structure the data. And so basically, Polar speaks Arrow, DuckDB speaks Arrow, and so there is 0 copies. So this actually creates little overhead. The only overhead is that you are installing both DuckDB and Polar's, Python library. But as I told you, DuckDB is pretty light, and depending on what because of the extension mechanism, it will only load what is needed. So I've seen a lot of people. I would be honest, before Pandas 2.0, because there was still but a lot of people moving their transformation layer from Pandas and replacing DuckDB with it because of the speed. And then doing the rest. If they're doing data science and they have a library that depends on a Panda data frame, right? Then you can just export into, a Polars or a Panda data frame. Here you see. And you have it ready, right? So really easy to swap in, swap out your tools when you want to experiment and try out things. For example, if you want to read from BigQuery and you want to install like the Python SDK and so on, you just want one SQL query, you'd use the DuckDB BigQuery extension and then just return it as a Polars and Panda data frame and do your stuff. All right, so we covered all those things really quickly. I know it was a lot. I think you start maybe to understand that DuckDB is more than a data frame library. It's a whole ecosystem, right? We covered how to read directly from cloud storage, file format, database. There is its own DuckDB file format, and the data frame engine operability and database operability works really well. Simple to install, no server, and friendly SQL. So just a word about MotherDuck. So MotherDuck is the DuckDB in the cloud. So you can also sign up for free. I'll leave you a bit, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to do those commands. And if whenever you're ready and you can share, I want to ask you, I don't know if I put the data set, I need to check. All right, so what's the most shared domain website on Hacker News? Okay, so there is a database that's contained all the data of Hacker News up to this year, January. So it's a database of like 11 gigabytes, but nothing for DuckDB. And if you have the answer of what's the most shared domain on Hacker News, you can pick one of these. So now I'm announcing the prize before maybe you're going to get more motivated. So what is happening here is that if you create a sign up for MotherDuck, you just do an attach command that we saw. And here there is a syntax issue, right? There is a quote. You just do attach MD. You're going to have a redirect to a Webflow, or you can store your MotherDuck token. Actually, this part is optional. If you don't do it, you're going to be authorized to a Webflow. You click, and you're connected to the cloud. And now you have also a DuckDB compute and a DuckDB storage on the cloud. I don't know any framework where you can move from local to the cloud that easy with one command, right? And yes, we are doing a good job at MotherDuck, but it's mostly by design because DuckDB is an in-process memory, right? It's impossible by design to have BigQuery or Snowflake to have it locally. They basically kind of had to do an emulator or something. But here you have the same database running in the cloud, and so we can store the data over there, and you can use the compute over there. And just a word about like the design, because I haven't talked about it, but Hannes has spoken, and there is a lot of content out there. You know, the distributed compute comes like in 2010 with Spark and so on, because we couldn't scale the hardware, right? We had much more compute and data needed, right? But we had to scale the hardware. So we put common hardware next to each other. This is what we used to put in servers, data centers, right? In 2010, right? You get like 16 to 32 gigabytes of memory of server, and you stack them. And so the hardware has catch up a lot, right? Especially with like Apple in their latest, you know, since the Apple Silicon now, this is a couple of years. And so the paradigm is that the distributed compute is really expensive because you have all the network, all the component needs to talk to each other, and that's a huge overhead. I've seen so many people using Databricks and Spark. I love it, I still love it, but just run like a really small data set. It is an overhead, and it's by design. DuckDB has a scale-up approach rather than scale-out. So rather than putting multiple little ducks in parallel, we just get a bigger duck. And so MotherDuck has different instance sites, but everything runs, you know, on a single machine, and that's enough. We have people running terabytes of data over there. I would also recommend you, if you're not interested, to learn more about this, this paradigm shift, Big Data is Dead. This blog that was quite popular 2 years ago by Jordan, our CEO over there. He's the founding engineer of BigQuery. So he worked on distributed engine. So he knows what he's talking about. Yeah, there is really interesting. Again, it takes everything I'm saying for a grain of salt. Do your own research, right? Of course, I'm biased. I'm just giving you the information. All right, let's move on. Anyone has the answer? I would be too fast. All right. We have about 20 minutes. And still a lot of things. Yeah, I'm just going to talk about serving your DuckDB database, because I get often this question. So now you work locally, and either you have Parquet file that you exported, you want to serve it. You can serve either one file with the DuckDB file database, right, that we saw, or you can store classically a Parquet file in the data lake setup. But the problem is that where do you put your compute? Do you run it DuckDB in a Lambda? Yes, you can. Okta does that at scale with millions of Lambdas, and they just process, you know, small Parquet file. So there is multiple ways to scale DuckDB. So the distributing thing is happening at different level, right? It can happen, for example, at the file level. But the challenge that you are on your own, so to be honest, the most, you can also type DuckDB in production. You're going to get a blog that I wrote with Simon about all the companies that's using DuckDB in production today. And to be honest, their data maturity is pretty high because they have like infrastructure team that handles Kubernetes clusters and so on to manage this. The other thing is that once you connect your other stack, let's say a BI tool and so on, you need also a place to serve and compute, right? Because typically a Tableau or Power BI or whatever is going to connect to a database and the compute is going to be there, right? So you need some way to have your storage and your compute, you know, tied together on the cloud. And so that's why also MotherDuck makes sense. And it's not saying, you know, we need to, it's the cloud version. It's just by design, DuckDB is really specific because it's run in process single node. So there is a lot of features that DuckDB Labs will never develop because of, you know, its origin. And by the way, of its origin, sorry, I digress there, but Hannes created DuckDB because of people using DataFrame and having a bunch of files like CSV, Parquet, and so on. And he said, I think everything can be handled in a database file format. This could be super light, easy to share. But it was also in a mindset of, local prototyping, research, data science, which worked really great, right? But as soon as you scale more into an industry setup, it's really a different beast. All right, so I have 30 minutes for the second one, but as you see, I have only 20 minutes. So I'm just gonna do a walkover, and of course, feel free to take it that any of what we did today, and take the time at home to go over. Yes, question? Yeah, go ahead. Yes, GitHub, indeed. So you can come and pick one of those ducks. Actually, I cannot give you this one because actually it was a gift from people in Dublin, so they will be really mad at me if I'm live streaming this. And but you could pick any of those ducks after, okay? So yeah, and just side note again about the data, it's pretty common actually. Hacker News is a thing for tech people. So actually, the thing that blow up is often GitHub link or new project, open source. So I'm going to do a walkthrough of like a couple of minutes, and I think I'm going to talk about WASM. And you see I have those things, which is bonus. I put every time some resource, so a blog, a reference, and there is tons of video if you're not sick of my face yet on YouTube that you can watch about those concepts if you want to learn those. But yeah, let's do the end-to-end project overview. So it's a simple project where basically we read from an API, we read from one CSV, two CSV, then we load it into DuckDB in memory, we do some transformation, and then we serve it for data visualization like geospatial, so directly using the extension spatial from DuckDB. And we can also export it as a DuckDB file or a Parquet file to be served into another application. Or, I haven't put it there, what you could be doing, because what's commonly people doing in analytics is serve it into an OLTP database, because that's where the web app is. So for example, if you go on LinkedIn or whatsoever, you always have statistic with some graph, right, on data. And usually the setup is it's pre-cache, pre-compute data that is served on an OLTP database because the response has to be fast, okay? And so here, basically, it could be a Postgres database. And because you have the Postgres scanner, you can actually write back to Postgres directly in DuckDB. So you could do, one way and then on source, if you source from Postgres, and then write back to compute the result to Postgres. That's worked also. Or you can use also MotherDuck directly. We have a customer doing that. So serving visualization, notebook here. Sorry, I'm lost. So it's simple, a bit on kind of like redo of what we did before. Here you see I'm loading, installing specifically the extension. This one is not needed. You're never going to see it. The spatial one is a really heavy extension for a lot of spatial file format and function. So this one you need to load it specifically. And I'm also loading Landboard, which is just a tool to visualize spatial data directly in a notebook. And so I'm doing the same magic than what we did before. Basically just loading from an API, a JSON API, and you see I'm boxing into Germany latitude. So I'm just doing like a heavy square around Germany. And I'm trying to load all the AV electric vehicle charging spots from there. And then I'm getting population data and zip code to have by states. And my idea is to understand where, per 100,000 of inhabitants, how many have, charging spots, if there is space where it's more collocated. And so you see here, we loaded all this data. Then I can do a couple of transformation. Everything is in memory there. Always, it's pretty fast because again, because of DuckDB, but also the data is pretty light. But I also invite you to play around 1 giga or 10 gigabytes of data once you get, a good bandwidth, or at home if you are. So this is the display. So that's all the electric charging spots. So we see that there is quite a big spot around here in Berlin. We have Munich and Stuttgart. There's quite a lot too. And yeah, I'll talk about the exports. I think it's interesting. So for example, here I'm doing the attach I told you after, right? I didn't do an attach, but I want to save the final data set. So I'm just doing this. It's going to create against the database here. And I'm just going to export the table over there. And I'm going to export also to Parquet. And that's the copy command we were talking, okay? So copy the table name to, and actually this one is even optional. Because again, there is different parameter over there. Same for CSV or same for JSON. If you're not using any of those, you can skip it. So you start to see a bit like, I hope you understand the philosophy from the start, that there is always minimum code involved, right? There is really like a default that works most of the time, and whenever you need specific parameters, they of course are there for you to use it. So yeah, and that's basically the summary. That's the top area with their zip code. And that's the place. So Bayern is actually number 3. So per 100,000 inhabitants, okay. Yeah, that's roughly the project. And so now we have basically Parquet file, you see here. I have a DuckDB file format that I can use for serving. So I'm gonna close with something really fun. Which is WebAssembly. Who has heard about WebAssembly? Okay, not a lot. It is super cool technology. It's been there for a while. So if you go to Figma, which is a design platform, it's like a Photoshop in the browser. Everything is running into a WebAssembly written in Rust or C++. And the thing is that it's kind of a container to run low-level code, like high-performance requirement application that is written in C++ or Rust in the browser. And once you load it, everything is loaded on your local compute, and you can disconnect and turn it. So if you use Figma, you can do the experiment. You disconnect from the internet once you loaded the app, and it's still working. Okay? That's the beauty of WebAssembly. It's kind of like a way to distribute heavily app without having to install it. DuckDB supports WebAssembly. And so if you go to DuckDB shell.duckdb.org, and I'm going to do, I hope I still remember. I'm generating a TPC H dataset. So it's a benchmark dataset. It's for 1 gigabyte, so that's the scale factor. So I'm going to generate now 1 gigabyte of data. And normally the extension is loaded because it's also an extension that's going to generate the data set, okay? I'm going to do something crazy. And so now, if I do show tables, everything works. I'm not working server-side. So it's not a OLAP where there is a Python runtime running on Google server. Everything is running in the browser, okay? So if I do customer, I'm going to get a query. I was maybe a bit greedy because it's still 1 gigabyte of data set. Okay, it's there. And you can do, I think I have an example. Yeah, let's do that. So I'm doing a filtering, a sum against the line item table. Again, like it's about the size of 1 gigabyte of data. Okay, he's not happy. I was a bit too greedy. Let's do again. I'm going to call directly the query after. Yeah, so it works. You see, I'm still offline now. So everything is happening in the browser because the app has been loaded, okay? Boom. So I'm querying around, how much data is there? Yeah. Jesus. So 6 million rows in harder millisecond in the browser, nothing to install. And so there is fun use case. So if you go, because here it's my cache browser, it's not going to work. On a MotherDuck tutorial, I've put it into a JavaScript app, and there is a lot of people doing that. And now here you have DuckDB WASM in JavaScript. That works. And so what I'm going to do is authenticate to MotherDuck. And you're going to see it's going to set up the database. So what it's going to do is going to load some data locally. And now I can run those queries in my browser directly. So it's exactly as you see, before with the shell, but it can be fully integrated in the app, right? And the beauty of it is push the compute to the client. So you save money also. So if you put the things a bit further, like when you go on an app and you have analytics, if there is DuckDB running on the client, it's a win-win for everybody. The user gets a better experience because it's super fast, because everything is happening locally. It's not doing the query to the server and then getting the answer, right? It's happening in your browser or your phone. And on top of that, you use the local compute, right? You're not using the server compute. So yeah, everybody wins and you save money along the way. So this is WASM. Usually it's more on the web development base, but it's really powerful. I would say if you think as a data person or a Python person and you're often involved in the data team, you're always serving customer, right? And if you can provide them a super easy, great way to serve the data, they're going to be more than happy, to have such a solution rather than querying an OLAP database directly they don't know or whatsoever. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? I may go to the Slido to see if there is a question, but we are going to the, wow, okay. I need 6 minutes at least to do that. So we're going to go to the questions. We have two things that I invite you to look after. MCP, so basically it's using, if using Cursor or whatsoever to develop, you have MCP DuckDB. And so that enables you to have DuckDB, basically just an interface to have a DuckDB local where you can ask questions. So here is I ask a question and it's going to query my data. I just pass an S3 path and it's going to do the stuff for me and call a DuckDB CLI and do the compute and get the result. And it's super great to bootstrap complex SQL queries because you already have tested them, right? Rather than having you going on an IDE looking at the data, you just ask the question to the agent, you let it run, look and comment, and it's doing the action for you, and everything is happening locally, right? It's just interacting with a local DuckDB, or you can interact with a remote server. This is Duck Lake. This is a new DuckDB's new table format. Also invite you to look if you're into Iceberg and Delta Lake. It's really a must read. Not saying you should use it. I think the approach is really interesting. So yeah, that's about it for today. Thank you. I put you more resource over there if you want to check it out. And there is a feedback form here. It's really take just 3 minutes so that the other people next to you that's going to have a DuckDB workshop, God knows where, going to have maybe a better experience on what we can improve or what you did like. So please, it's just 3 minutes, 3 questions, and that will help me a lot. Thank you.
We do have another question here.
Yeah.
On the website. Can you read the microphone?
Yes. How DuckDB handles vector data and embedding? That's a really good question. So we have plenty of blogs. So there is vector search there is vector search. So if I go, I'm going to put, so I invite you to go to MotherDuck blog, but some of my colleagues have specifically focused on that to basically just do causing search and so on. So with pure SQL using DuckDB with embeddings. And I'm actually doing a live stream about AI memory agent, and that you can have on MotherDuck/events. Wait, this is when Rightam came back. Here, this one. So DuckDB Mates AI, we're going to talk also about that with Cogni, which is an open source memory AI agent. So there is a lot also of framework that work well with DuckDB for that, but DuckDB itself is also good for vector search. So there is plenty of resource for that. There was another question?
You covered all these likely questions.
Are extension required to be loaded all the time, or they are persisted? They are persisted locally, but typically if you're using DuckDB in pipeline setup, you always get a fresh new environment, right? Whenever your job pipeline is working. But if you're working locally, I told you it is persisted. It is persisted there, okay? So if I do extension, and then there is, depending on the version of DuckDB, and you have all the extension persisted there.
Yeah, I think we only have time for one more question. So what's the use case for DuckDB in conjunction with server-based OLAP?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've seen a lot of people using it for local development or for testing, okay? So it's really part of your toolkit. That's why the talk was called the Swiss Army knife. Or to offload some larger workload where those OLAP server have, not like the minimum that you can get sometimes is already an overkill, right? So they offload some of them to OLAP from OLAP server existing stack, typically Databricks job, as I mentioned. There is a couple of questions also on the Slido. I'll make sure to answer all of them by the end of today or tomorrow, depending on how hangover I am after tonight. But also feel free to reach out to me after. I have the Duck suit, so I should be pretty easily visible. If you want to chat about DuckDB or MotherDuck or just Ducks, that's also fine.
Thanks a lot. Applause for this.